and that bell of awareness rings and just reminds you where that feeling's coming from. But you were saying you've been learning more about how your dad sees himself. Say more about that.
You know, on a recent visit, I asked him if he felt like he was really known for who he truly was.
Well, yes. By the people who know me best, those closest to me.
And what he wanted to be known for.
Always wanted to be thought of as dependable.
And dependable he was. But now he's the one who has to depend on all this other help and all this other attention. It runs counter to everything he defines himself by, so it's really hard to watch his independence melt away. I'm sure he really hates that. And I totally get it.
What do you mean, you totally get it?
Well, when he's talking about being dependable, he's really talking about self-sufficiency. Being the guy that got the job done and got it right. So getting it right has become a mild obsession for all of us kids, me included. To him, planning and preparation meant control. And loss of control meant kind of a personal embarrassment. Something to feel guilt and frustration and even anger over.
And now he's not in control so much.
Right, so he's frustrated and embarrassed and angry sometimes.
And guilty too, I expect. I mean, he probably feels like he should have been able to plan his way out of being so dependent and helpless.
Yeah, well, he did have a plan, and I got to say, he really worked that plan great until just a few months ago. But now he totally needs more help, and that means he's got to sacrifice his precious alone time. It's something else that I really get.
So he was a loner.
So when we were growing up, Dad was always home from work for the 6 o'clock dinner. We'd sit around the table and everyone had to report on our days.
So Paul, how was your day today?
It was pretty good. So we had a math test and I'm pretty sure I got at least an A on it, and we were playing basketball with my friends all day.
And you, Steve?
Not that much happened, but we started a new energy unit in my science class.
Of course, he never said a word about his.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Today there was a guy that was going down the slide, and he accidentally fell off the slide, and then he chipped his finger on one of the wood chips and started bleeding really badly.
Oh no.
He'd do the dishes since Mom had cooked, and then he'd disappear into his study behind closed doors to read or do some office work for the rest of the night. It was a little intimidating to ask him for homework help even, because it meant knocking on the door, interrupting him, and being beckoned in. We all kind of thought the expectation was that we'd figure out our homework for ourselves and not disturb him. So usually that's what we tried to do. It wasn't always like that. I mean, he'd watch TV with us, sitcoms and sports on the weekends, of course, the only time sports was on back then. And we listened to his music after dinner and comedy albums. God, he loved Bob Newhart. You know those one-sided telephone bits that Newhart did? We all laughed so hard. He laughed hard. It was great. Like I said earlier, he was at all of our sports games.
And you said you played golf with him.
Yeah, Steve and I played golf with him, but that was not so much a fun time, really, because Steve and I, when we were young, we really kind of sucked, and he was always a good golfer. He could, shoot in the mid-70s, low 80s, so he was always kind of pushing us to get a little bit better, and that was always kind of tense.
More getting it right time?
Right, getting his game right, getting his score down.
But not connecting with you two.
Well, in his way, I guess, kind of like when he was playing golf with his dad in the 1930s. It was good to be together, but even up to his very last rounds, when he was playing in his late 80s, I could not get a casual conversation going with him on the golf course. He was so focused on his game. There was such a emphasis on order and precision and self-sufficiency. So all of his kids grew up with this don't help me, I can do it mentality that I'm sure has made us all sort of insufferable to be with at times. You know, you could ask our partners about that. So anyway, the possibility of this swarm of people around him doing everything for him, it's, you know, it's got to be some kind of torture for him and really hard for us kids to watch.
I'm kind of curious about his social circle there when your kids aren't around. You know, because most studies say that social support is really key as we age. Had he been social around the retirement home?
Well, the social part was mostly my mom's thing. And my dad did it, but a little reluctantly. And the good news is that since she passed away, you know, he hasn't become a recluse. And so I appreciate that. But most of his socializing is kept in the box of meal taking, you know. He's insisted on going down to meals in the cafeteria with their same little eating group as when my mom was living. I don't think he gets a lot out of it besides the sustenance, but there's some comfort of, you know, having the job, of showing up on time for an institutional meal. That makes sense to his military training. Now, this meal bunch, you know, they're sweet people doing their best, but, you know, institutional cafeteria culture, it's the same throughout time. School cafeterias, military cafeterias. People generally sit with the same people most days. It's sometimes hard for new people to fit in. There's some gossiping, particularly about who's sick and what's wrong with them. My dad steers clear of that. You know, he'll engage in conversation, but he's pretty selective. He's easily friendly with others, but he doesn't have a history of many deep friendships. But he's very well liked by the community there. He's always been good with polite manners and taking a little time with anyone he runs into. But I think even that effort is a little bit of a stretch for him. So I think when he gets back to his room, he really doesn't want any visitors and treasures that time to himself. He's got a list of things he wants to do. Open the mail, pay a bill, read the sports news, write a letter. I mean, he'll take an hour or more to write a letter to each of his 3 kids. And he's been doing that for 40 years. And back to his self-sufficiency imperative, he hasn't wanted much of the nursing help he's entitled to there for most of the last 4 years since Mom died. And now that he's not going down to meals because of his faint, he's the one that people are gossiping about in the cafeteria. And everyone's parading up to his room to check on him. Nurses, therapists, and volunteer helpers, in and out all day long. Monday Night Football tonight, Dad, on ESPN. Yeah, come in.
Tom, you there? Just making my round. Oh, hello.
Hi, Ralph. This is my son, Steve.
It's Paul.
Paul,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Steve's my older brother. I've been answering to his name since elementary school.
I'm on the shut-in visitor committee.
All right.
How you been, Tom? I heard you took a fall or something.
No, I just got a little woozy at breakfast the other day.
Doing better?
Yeah, a little better.
Gene and I just got back from a cruise. You know, one of those carnival deals. I really didn't want to go, but Gene just loves them. And the food, oh my gosh, they had this potato hash out at every meal. I could not stop eating. And of course, they have the soft serve ice cream bar open 24 hours. They had a show every night. I didn't think the comedians were very good, but they had this one little singer one night sound just like Patsy Cline. She was really something. You do like Patsy Cline, don't you, Tom?
Oh, sure, Patsy Cline was great.
Gene just went crazy shopping at those port stops. I stayed on the boat mostly. I can't keep up with her. But She palled up with these other ladies. They went into town and came back with just bags of stuff. And we had a hard time getting some of that stuff through security, too.
Dad, didn't you want to get a nap in this afternoon?
Yeah, I really.
American had this long delay. We sat on the tarmac in Miami for over an hour, I'll bet. And they didn't have any snacks either. And then we landed. I got this bad sinus headache. Of course, I get it every time anyway. So, anyway, Tom, when you coming back down to Mills?
As soon as I can.
All right. Well, we miss you. I got more stops to make. Nice to meet you, Steve.
Never mind, Ralph. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Ralph. Say hi to the guys for me.
Whew. Pretty much just talks about himself, that Ralph, don't he?
It's just the way Ralph is. But he's all right.
Dad, I wanted to talk to you about the... Yes?
Mr. Williams, it's Marianne from therapy. You had an appointment today at 1:30. Are you coming down?
He's just gotten back from the hospital. I don't think he's up for it.
Well, nobody told us. Are you sure that's right, Mr. Williams?
He's not hard of hearing.
Mr. Williams, are you refusing therapy?
No, I just don't think I can do it today.
He is really weak after this last hospital visit.
Well, he'll get weaker if he doesn't try therapy. He won't be able to get out of bed on his own pretty soon. And if he refuses a second time, I will have to cut him from the rolls. And Medicare won't pay for it if he refuses.
Okay, all right. Thanks for telling me that. Just not today.
Well, all right.
They all think I'm going to get better, but I'm not.
What's that, Dad?
I'm not going to get better.
Well, I mean, you might, Dad. You just need a little help for a little while. Maybe some home health assistance for a few hours a day.
What are they going to do? Watch me while I eat? Watch me while I get dressed? Watch me while I go to the bathroom?
Yeah, Dad, but you haven't been able to do any of those things very well on your own for the last week or so. You know, the nursing staff is helping, but they're going to tell me pretty soon, I think, that we're going to have to move to home health.
But I thought that's what I was paying for.
No, Dad, the nursing staff has very strict rules about what they can do for you. I mean, a lot of them do it for you because they really like you a lot, but they've been telling me already that we're going to have to move to some home health help. Now, Dad, I can spend more time with you here. With Steve and Jane and their teaching schedules, they can't spend a lot of days with you here, but I can spend weeks at a time since I work for myself, as long as I've got my laptop and can take some time to, make some phone calls and do some writing. I can be here longer with you, and I would do that for you, Dad, if that's what you really wanted.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
So I told him I'd do it, but I feel guilty because I'm just not really sure that I meant it. Once he'd paid for me to come, the airfare and the guest room and the food and the rental car, and he'd insist on doing all that, paying for it. Then he could have bought home health care for that same amount of time.
Yeah, it's probably hard for him to accept strangers and most likely women helping him with the intimacies of dressing and bathing, especially if he prides himself on his self-sufficiency. He'd be more comfortable with you. But you just said you felt guilty because you're not sure you meant it. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I'd say I have a really complicated relationship with the extended care facility. I am really glad that my parents sold the house and moved in there like almost 20 years ago now. But it is expensive to be in these places. The good part is you get what you pay for. The staff is really professional. They've got all kinds of activities and stuff. I mean, I told my mom one time that it's like you guys live on a cruise ship. You know, it's like food and activities and recreation all day, every day. But every time I'd visit, I couldn't help but look down those assisted living halls or down toward the medical wing and not think about how my parents were going to wind up in those places eventually, slowly dying. And despite everything they do to try to disguise it, you know, there's this sort of impending feeling of death and dying right nearby. It's right down the hall. So that, and the fact that one's parents can get on one's nerves fairly easily, I could never really comfortably spend more than 4 or 5 days at one time. It's emotionally exhausting, and I really feel like I need to get home. And that feeling's not going away just because my dad is really struggling now and he really needs my help.
But there's another part. What?
You know, that really likes my life here and now, and I just don't want to be away from it for very long. You know, I should be able to help my dad as much as he needs it and as long as he needs it. But, you know, I'm just not even sure that he wants me there.
Well, ambivalence is the stuff of life. And that sounds like something you both are dealing with right now. You know, and there's always kind of a push-pull going on with our parents near the end. You know, he wants you there, he doesn't want you there. But it was good that you offered, and it's okay to feel conflicted about it. The ambivalence means you're both dealing with a triangle. Do you remember the triangle?
You better remind me.
Okay. Well, in this corner is the id, and the id is always sending out these signals that I want what I want it now. In the other corner is our superego, and it's very sensitive to the rules of society and what other people think of us.
And the ego is up in the middle of the triangle.
Right, at the top, in the middle, and it's trying to craft a compromise between the other two. I mean, your dad knew what he was doing when they moved into that place. You know, he didn't want you kids to have to care for them. He thought it was the dependable, responsible thing to do. But now that he's getting near the end and he sees that strangers are having to take care of him, that's not what he really wants. And his ego will likely settle for a compromise.
And so my id is really fixated on living my life the way I want to live it here and now. The superego is society sort of imposing that expectation that kids should help their parents. And my ego is going to offer some sort of compromise that has me going there, but maybe not spending as much time.
Yeah, sounds like it. And no one's going to accuse you and your siblings of not having been engaged. Quite the opposite, I bet.
Yeah, I guess. It's just hard to witness this, you know. His life isn't his own anymore.
Well, you know, actually it is his life. Dying's part of the bargain. And it's part of all of our lives to be losing little pieces of it as we go down the path. And you and I, we're next in line to go off the diving board.
Whoa, wait a minute. We've got a few decades before that, right? I mean, isn't there some time while we're still at least standing in line, waiting to get on the ladder to that diving board?
We don't really know, do we?
Oh. And in the meantime, we're all worrying about how high the jump is or how cold the water is.
Or how much exhilarating fun it might be.
Well, I guess. I don't...
Could be the greatest thing that we all experience, and we're just all desperately putting it off. We don't know. People who have had near-death experiences, who have kind of taken a few steps towards the edge and come back, they report a palpable peace, kind of a lightness and joy.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I guess you're right, we just don't know. The old agnostic creed.
Yeah. Well, in any case, though, it's a real gift that you get to watch your dad on the diving board. You can watch and see what works for him. And remember that. And the things that aren't working for him, you can kind of help steer him clear towards other choices, or at the very least, discard that from your dying plan.
Well, what works for him is when he's gracious with all these helpers and visitors. He's a lot more patient with it than I think I'd be, to tell you the truth. He does a pretty good job of rolling with their good intentions.
That's a good one to remember. And you can expect him to voice his frustrations about his loss of independence, and maybe even crave dying before long. But that's where you can be there to help him get through that.
Yeah, well, that's really starting to happen already. And I'm really not sure what to do about it, because my inclination is to immediately try to make him feel grateful for something and, forget the bad shit.
I mean, you can do that, but don't start there. Make it right first for him to feel frustrated, then make it wrong for him to get stuck there.
Make it right? I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Well, you acknowledge his upset. You agree with him how shitty it is. He just wants to feel he's been heard first before you offer an alternative way to think about it.
Okay. All right, so then what is make it wrong?
Well, then you offer the alternative way of being. You remind him some of what he has to be grateful for.
Okay. Make it right, and then make it wrong.
Make it right, then make it wrong. And what do you want from this process, Paul?
What do I want? I'm not sure I know what you mean.
I mean, what do you want to give, and what do you want to get from your dad in these final days?
Just to be there, in his last days, to offer him some kind of solace, to do for him what I couldn't do for my mom, because I couldn't get back in time for my mom. I had to tell her lifeless body, days after she died.
And what'd you say?
That she did a good job. She lived in fear of not being a good enough mom or a good enough wife. So I just, wanted to tell her that she succeeded,
And your dad? What do you want to tell him?
Well, the same thing, basically. I mean, I don't have any great deathbed revelation to offer to him. Every time I've seen him over the last 5 years, I've told him I loved him and how much he means to me. But, I'd like to let him know that he succeeded and let him know how much of an impact he had on other people. Kind of the It's a Wonderful Life lesson, I guess.
Each one's life touches so many other lives.
Yeah, I guess, be his Clarence a little bit. He never understood the value of therapy, like his whole generation. Like, therapy had a stigma attached to it. In fact, I told my mom that I was in therapy once, and she said, "But you're not mentally ill." I know I'm not accredited like you are, but I would like to be able to play that role for him a little bit, offer him a little philosophical guidance.
Well, I'd be happy to deputize you.
Thanks. Yeah, I want to just play his favorite music for him and get him to try to remember a good time in his life. I talked with a hospice worker once who said that this stage of life it's like you're right on the edge of a fast-moving river, and the ones that don't get stuck trying to cling to the branches on the riverbed and just go with the flow are the ones that have the easiest time with it. So I just want to encourage him to do that, to let go with the flow and be at peace.
Sounds like you're already helping the way you want to. And I have a feeling that you will do more given the chance. You will. But, there's no guarantee that we'll be with our loved ones when they pass.
Yeah, I know.
Anything else from this visit you want to tell me about, Paul?
Yeah, actually. After that parade of visitors and helpers, we were just resting later that night and talking about family memories and old times. My biggest crack up on a bike That would have been like 1964, near the old Wood Acres house. You remember any of that?
No, I don't remember that.
I remember you running down the street, Cromwell Avenue, to scoop me up off the pavement after I ran into the barricade at the end of that road. You can see it just like it was yesterday. Hey, Dad, how come you don't have any pictures of us from the 21st century?
Those were the pictures your mother liked best. I kept them. I like them too.
Hey, Dad, do you still have that loaner copy of your book? Chaplain Mike wanted to come by and pick it up. He wants to read it.
Oh, it's over there on top of the bookcase. You could grab it if you want to.
He wrote a book?
Yep, about his war experiences. Back in the 1980s when he retired, he wrote it all longhand. We had it typed and bound.
Hand me that for a minute.
We felt really lucky because a lot of World War II men never even spoke about the war. And he didn't much for 35 years after the war. But then he wrote the book. And that night, he asked to see it and started reading from a specific chapter. Now, never mind that one of his major gripes now is that he can't see well enough to read. But he read this perfectly, probably because he wrote it and lived it. But it seemed like it was something he really wanted me to hear. About him in Europe at the Battle of the Bulge, leading a transmission wire recovery detail in the middle of the night in the snow for Patton's Third Army.
In our unit, telephone wire was just as important as ammunition and gasoline. If you didn't have it, you were out of business. It was not my style to stand around and watch the other men work. Every pair of hands was needed. Tired, cold, and wet, we got the job done. Back at base, a couple of the men built a fire. Not wanting to claim a choice spot because of rank, I shivered at the periphery of the group. Mike Allen, a soldier who up to then treated me with indifference, invited me closer. Here, Lieutenant, come up where it's warmer. I understood the meaning of this gesture. Mike was a natural leader. If he accepted me, the others would too. I felt a surge of self-confidence. The jobs I had done were routine. Unloading a truck and retrieving some field wire were routine. But I had shown some leadership, protected the men from the mines. I didn't like it, but maybe I could do the job after all.
You were how old then, Dad? Like 21?
22.
22. Jesus.
You see, Paul, if somehow you gave the impression that you were better than anybody else, they weren't going to respect you. And if you would say your life is more valuable than their lives, they weren't going to respect you. I mean, you wouldn't tell a private, go across that field. If anybody shoots at you, come tell me. It's like telling him, your life is less important than mine.
So what do you do, Dad?
Well, you tell them, we go together. We go together. That's why I always liked going out with Duran and Garcia. They knew I would never leave them in a ditch somewhere. And I knew they'd never leave me in a ditch somewhere. We go out together, we're coming back together.
And who were Duran and Garcia?
2 Mexican Americans that were in the unit with my dad. And they recommended him for a Bronze Star for an event where they took some heavy German artillery fire. My dad was most proud of the fact that 2 enlisted men below him in rank recommended him for the medal.
So what did you take from what he read to you?
Well, I had read it before, it was years ago. But I think it was part of him trying to answer that question of what he wanted to be remembered for.
What do you mean?
By knowing how to really lead people well, by completely understanding what they do underneath you and sometimes doing it with them, and certainly giving them credit and really caring about them as people.
See, that's what I was talking about last time. Our parents showing us not exactly what to do with our lives, but more a matter of how to live our lives.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did it in war, and he did it in his career at the telephone company. You know, he would work every Christmas day so that some of his operators could have the day off. I mean, he knew it was going to be one of the busiest days of the year for phone calling, but you know, he took that load on the holiday for them.
Well, and from what you told me over the years, it sounds like you picked that up. He didn't even have to be explicit about it. You know, he did it, you saw it, and you felt it as you were growing up.
I didn't go to war, but I suppose I had opportunities to do it, you know, on sports teams and in my work, like when I was running newsrooms or leading investigative reporting teams, or even just trying to win the trust of a source. You know, I guess it all comes into play.
Well, and more broadly, what he was modeling was empathy. And you're good at that. In fact, you probably took it a step or two farther than he could.
Well, I'm trying.
This book, I mean, it sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's really honest. He wrote a fair amount about, you know, his own dad, his relationship with the two-star general. And he had some issues about being a general's son.
Like what?
Well, it was kind of stuff that you would expect. Being anxious about his dad popping in on the unit for an unannounced visit, or thinking about what the rest of the unit thought about him being a general's son. Maybe him getting preferential treatment because of that, you know. And there was a stoicism about his dad's relationship to war that my dad really couldn't adopt. My dad wrote he could never be unemotional in combat. He felt the fear and the dread too deeply. And that's why he didn't make the military his career, worked for the phone company in management for all those years instead. And he may have wondered all these years if his dad was okay with my dad's choice to leave the military. And my dad may have wondered whether he really measured up in his dad's eyes, or in the grand scheme of things. You know, there was a song that my dad played for me once. Sinatra sang it, Ella sang it, a bunch of people sang it. It's called Why Was I Born? And it goes, why was I born? Why am I living? What do I get? And what am I giving? I just got to think that song is bouncing around in his head these days.
Liz's mom had a horrible experience with hospice when she was dying. And 24/7 home health's going to be expensive, and Medicare doesn't cover that.
He's got the money. I don't care if I don't get any of it in inheritance.
No, I don't either. I'm just saying so we all know.
Look, I remember Liz's mom had a bad time with hospice. But honestly, I think that's pretty rare. And Steve, home health will be better for you. You're the one that always has to leave your classroom and go up there every time he faints and goes to the ER.
I don't know, it's just, I think he's gonna hate having all those people around all day. I see him once a week, I talk to him every night. Every time I bring up home health, he gets mad and says, I don't know what they're gonna do all day.
Yeah, no, I've heard that too. I think part of it is that each one of us would hate it. I mean, if we couldn't take care of ourselves and had all these people hovering around all the time.
God, I know I'd hate it.